Hello and good morning. Happy May the 4th to everybody. Hope you guys are having a Star Wars themed potluck like we are today. So that's what we have going on right after this webinar is over. Also, this webinar is being recorded. So you might be watching this in the future. But for those of you watching it now, do know that, it'll be available on the website by the end of the day, probably, certainly by Monday at the latest. I see a great collection of people in to watch this. A lot of knowledge here to be gained and shared. So do please use that Q&A button in the upper left. Get your questions in. Go ahead and, as you start to see things that remind you of issues with your processes and file sharing and technology loads, I was myself just literally dealing with a tech support ticket regarding proxy objects in a Civil 3D file. Is a huge, huge part of what we're about to get into, just this giant issue of intelligent data and sharing files among your teammates, something that's becoming to be called BIM. But got a great little webinar in store. So saddle back in and get ready, and let me pass this on over to Amanda.
Thanks, Jeremiah, and welcome everybody. Thank you guys for joining us today. We're going to be talking about a lot of Civil 3D and a lot of coordination with other programs as well. So this quote pretty much sums up what we're talking about today. We're going to cover the ways you can use land effects as an add-on to Civil 3D to achieve a BIM level 2 workflow. We're going to talk about what BIM really is so you can measure your workflow and go over some examples of why it's important even for some small projects. This is myself, Amanda Berry. I'm a landscape architect out of the CSLA in Canada, and I have been using, I started using Civil 3D probably about 2 years after graduating, and over time actually started developing how I was going to be using it, because at the time that I started using it in about 2010, when Civil 3D got a major overhaul, there was actually no training at all on Civil 3D and how a landscape architect should use it. So a lot of what I did was trial by error, working with others in terms of trying to figure out ways to use Civil 3D for landscape architecture, and it really, really, really worked out. And I'm going to show you some of the things you can do with that today, mostly kind of going over what you can do, and maybe at the end we can go into some finer details. So we're going to first cover why BIM, types of tool sets that we support specifically that fall within a high BIM level 2, and we'll talk about what that means, and then finally what you can do with it. BIM started as something a lot more industry specific a long time ago, early 90s, late 80s. And used to actually mean building information and modeling, but it's becoming more general and industry-wide by today's definition. So when today, when you say BIM, it's not a tool specifically, it is an actual entire process, and that entire process can be accomplished with specific tool sets that we're going to talk about. It's not just buildings anymore. It's not just for architecture. It goes into civil engineering, and it goes into landscape architecture. And it's really important to kind of separate all of those, and we're going to talk about why. The main takeaway point of BIM is to reduce costs driven up by mistakes that could be caught and resolved before they are built. So it's bringing that workflow forward to the beginning, and even potentially into a lot of templates as well. Anything to reduce errors along the way that can come from redoing work that should be automated. With that in mind, we're going to kind of look into what I mean. I mentioned BIM level 2 a few times. And there's a few levels of BIM as we get to the eventual future of BIM level 3, which is the ideal. And we'll start at BIM level 3. So the ideal is all disciplines all work in the same environment. That environment should be web-based, it should be real-time, everybody's actually accessing the same data set all at once. So if you think of it in terms of today's file types, it would be as if everybody is working in the same file all at once, all at the same time. So it's kind of a concept that doesn't exist yet because it really doesn't work well with files. So that's where we go back down to BIM level 2. We're in BIM level 2 because BIM level 2 has 2D and 3D connection with at least some automation between the two. So it's not necessarily building everything up, and that's where land effects kind of plays into that. If you have played around with the 3D connection, you know about that, but it's also that connection between your drawings and so not just your 2D and your 3D, but also to data and to libraries of blocks and to coordinating through an Excel format with the programs for other disciplines as well. Because here in this BIM level 2 sphere, we really only can align ourselves with a very limited set of those designers that we work with in BIM level 3. That's why we're not at BIM level 3 yet, is because everybody can't work in the same environment. You can't have your irrigation, well, we have our irrigation tools in there, but things like skate park designers really like to work in Rhino. There isn't really a great software right now for landscape architects that also the skate park designer could go directly in there. There's also a sense of scale in that effect of like for electrical, if you are speccing a light bulb, you can spec the light bulb, but how far deep are you going into that? Like the person who designed the light bulb, do you have all of their data too? It gets a little jumbled. That's why level 3 isn't solid yet. But in level 2, you're basically kind of going around that circle, mostly in your own discipline. So the disciplines in level 2 can be separated. So you can have, you can be using a different program than your civil or than your architect or than your surveyor or than your lighting consultant. And that's okay as long as you can transfer some form of data between each other and you can coordinate that way. In level 2, a big factor is being able to have that smart automated processes within your own drawings as well, and being able to achieve the deliverables that you need to. If we go down to level 1 and 0, just so that you understand what they are and what makes, say, level 2 different than level 1. Level 1 is basically you have, in terms of how land effects works, you're working in the DWG format and you are XREFing DWGs and you're maybe exporting some things to SketchUp, but you have to build everything back up in SketchUp again. And there's no integrated data, there's no automated connectivity at all. The best you got there is a linked XREF, and then level 0 would be either your hand drawing or you have basic CAD and you're not XREFing, you're blocking drawings into your CAD drawing, very basic. So just so you have an understanding, if you're being asked on a project to achieve a certain level of BIM, they are always talking about BIM level 2. So that's where you need to set your goals to. And all of this kind of wraps around with your deliverables for BIM level 2. So your main deliverables are going to be a plan with data for your work. So automated for your work, error checking, clash detection, all of those things for your work in your own discipline. And a plan to coordinate with other consultants. And that can be in different file formats, because as we discussed, not everybody in your design team is going to be able to use the same program. And then you're going to need a plan to communicate the concept and construction documents to your client, to the public, all of that. That's where a lot of that 3D rendering comes in, and the link to smart databases for details and schedules and all of that automated process. And there's been a lot of talk about a BIM standard format, and IFC is kind of up and coming. but there are some major flaws with it in that not all types of objects are actually supported in IFC. If you had a chance to look into it, it basically takes every object in the drawing and combines it with data, and not all of them. It doesn't have what do you call it? It doesn't have definitions for every type of object in there. So one important thing is, like, there's no actual definition for a tree to be able to export into any other program that might use IFC and then import that IFC. So you lose a lot in there, and there isn't anything perfect that way. So it's limited at this time mostly by discipline. And DWG, as long as you're working with an integrated data set that can export to an XLS file, which is an Excel file, that definitely meets BIM level 2. And we'll kind of look along that line of BIM level 2 because it is a spectrum. It's not a fixed, okay, you're here and it can't get any better than that until we finally get to 3. No, it can actually get better and better and better, and you get more benefits as you go along. So if you are using, we're going to talk about the programs we support right now. If you work with land effects and you have either AutoCAD or FXCAD, and then you link that up with your Excel formats, you're still technically in level 1 because you don't have any link to 3D, but you're really, really close to level 2 because you have all of the data that isn't supposed to be in level 1. So that's why I kind of put that on the borderline there. It's not actually level 1 because you have all the integrated data, which doesn't come with level 1, but you don't have 3D. So that's that. As we go into level 2, you can see as we progress further and further and further into more and more and more 3D automated integration and being able to make changes that automatically update things in your drawing, and you can go back and forth between 2D and 3D to visualize, analyze, and then finally present your plan. And all of these items, as you go further along, you can see I actually put, as soon as you throw in the 3D here, I do kind of consider that the ability to go into SketchUp or Rhino as opposed to just Civil 3D. This is a little further along because especially for landscape architects, it becomes extremely difficult to render in Civil 3D. Despite all the benefits they'll show you in the future. That's why, or sorry, in a few minutes, but that's why over here at the end, as soon as you get Civil 3D, it becomes a lot more powerful, especially when you combine it with a better 3D rendering platform like SketchUp or Rhino. And then you get all the integrated data, you get the XLS output, you get the automated connection and all of those automated processes, as well as something that's really, really important for BIM is that connection to manufacturers. Having that integrated data that you can just pull and it's always up to date, that's also really important for the entire BIM process, is keeping that connection to basically all disciplines and suppliers. If you have any questions after the webinar, you are free to contact us, but we're about to jump into Civil. So I thought I'd take a quick break really early today in the webinar to see if there's any questions already lined up, and if not, to remind you guys to ask questions.
No questions so far, so yep, do feel free to get them typed in there and I'll get them all queued up for Amanda.
Great, thank you. Let's jump into it. So I have a project started here that I'm starting to work with, and I'm actually in Civil 3D. So if you're used to AutoCAD, there's a lot more buttons in here, and it does take a little bit of training and a bit of time to understand it. Pretty much a lot like it's certainly easier than Revit or something like that, because you're still able to work as native 2D AutoCAD. So you can absolutely work in here and you can draft in 2D like you always have. And that works just fine. But then you can, once you have all of these available tools, you can absolutely jump into it. So let's have a look at what I've actually got set up here so that you can see the capabilities that Civil 3D can actually add to the whole land effects platform. If you go in here, if we go in here and I just click this, you can see we have a whole other set of objects in here. So I'm looking at a tin surface actually that's being displayed as contours. Let me show that a little bit bigger, just like that. It's being displayed. I can set my contour interval over here under my tool space and settings. Under surface styles, I can set different types of surface styles, and I can actually flip between them. So right now I have all of my contours. I've set it so that they smooth nicely instead of being jagged. So it looks like if you were hand drawing it almost, but it's a lot more accurate. And then I can also go in here into my properties and start flipping this. So maybe for my presentation, I actually want my contours to be 0.2 and 1 meter. I can do that, and all of a sudden I have all of these contours where I can kind of look in here and analyze what's happening around all of these tennis courts. How much grading do I have going on? So that is really powerful. And I actually have this as a surface as well. I got a survey into this drawing, so I'm already connecting with surveyors because they almost always are able to give you a DWG with these spot elevations here, or with, I have gotten an XLS format survey before, and I have been able to import it. It takes a little bit of massaging to be able to actually make it into a 2D drawing, but you absolutely have that connection and can import that into CAD and create these little points right here that is basically feeding all of these features. It's this is a COGO point, or sorry, this is a surface elevation label, but it's actually connected to a COGO point down below it. These are smart points that you can change, and they will change the entire surface. And we'll see what you can do with that in a little bit. So yeah, these are, it's a little bit complicated. I'll kind of tell you how it's all put together. So I have these points from the survey that I loaded, and they're now smart points in my drawing. I have this existing surface that I've assigned to a specific style, so it gets that nice dashed gray appearance, and it basically tells me what my existing surface is. There are some way, we'll kind of go into a few things. Then what happens is I have these lines. So these are smart lines, and I've actually coordinated with my 2D drawing that I did of my entire site. You can actually see the 2D drawing below. I just imported those lines into this civil drawing, created this feature line from all of those lines, and then went ahead and started grading that feature line. So feature lines have the ability to go in here and you get all of these extra tools on setting the grade slope between points. So I can take this point and basically smooth out the grade between them, or tell this point it needs to be 5% below this point. You have that kind of capability and power in here. You can raise an entire feature line from other elevations on any surface. So say from a point on a contour line, or from a elevation point, or from another feature line, anything that has an elevation basically. I can also just set one elevation up a little higher. So I could set it to this one and set that one up just a little higher based on a reference from another elevation. I have a lot of powerful tools, and that, what I did with these feature lines is I added them to a surface. So if I kind of giving you an overview of how Civil works, you go over here in tool space, you have your settings, which is basically controls how things are displayed, and you have your prospector. Your prospector is where all of your items are. Oops, so let that go back. And you can see I have a lot of surfaces already put in here. So under that proposed surface, I have definitions, including break lines. My break lines are basically all of these green feature lines all over my plan. So this proposed surface is now completely coordinated by all of these feature lines in this drawing. So I can make changes to all of these and kind of go, I'll actually just show you right now. If I kind of go in here and let's say I make an elevation change and I actually want this to go, so it's telling me what elevation it is. I want that to go, it's right now going up at 1.47%. Keep in mind, I'm doing all this in meters. It's pretty much exactly the same in feet. I want that to go up at 5% instead. And right click to accept. It's telling me there's a few errors with some of my feature lines in the drawing, but you can see it's already started to ignore that. That's my virtual machine. Not liking the graphics, but it's all of a sudden changed all of my contours. Very smart, very, very dynamic and extremely powerful, especially once you get into some other things like I've set other kinds of display variables to this entire plan, including if I go in here and I just switch this over to my contours and triangles, you can see all of the triangles of the tin surface. And so this is really great in terms of if I want to massage how my contours actually display and fine tune how all of this works. I'm going to go into edit surface and just swap some edges so I can fine tune how everything in here works and make sure that all of those contours are very smooth and display exactly how I want, how the surface really should work. So when you're going into something like civil, you should have a basic understanding of how grading works so you can recognize these contour profiles as well. I can also go in here and take that same surface and go into, let's see, I'm going to do slope banding, no, elevation banding, 0.25 intervals. There we go. Huh. That did not, oh, that's right. I'm going to keep that at design. There we go, design. And what I've actually done in the background here is now that I have a existing surface in civil and I have a proposed surface in civil, I now have the power to figure out cut and fill between those two surfaces. Because they're dynamic, I can make changes and see those changes in the cut and fill in real time. And I use this all the time in terms of figuring out what I need to do in terms of my grading and fine tuning my initial concept grading. So I'm actually going to go into my prospector and I'm going up to my total cut and fill. And I'm going to right click and go to surface properties because I have turned this off to a no display. And I'm going to go down here to elevation banding. And I'm going to say okay. And turn that on. And what I've done here in the elevation banding is I have told it to every 0.25 of a meter, you could do it every 6 inches or every foot. I actually, even though I work in metric in Canada, I used to put these intervals at 0.15 of a meter, which is 6 inches, because the contractors were better able to understand that because a lot of the contractors grew up when Canada was in imperial. So it's really easy to mix and match that way. But basically every step up here is another 0.25. And when there's no color, it's pretty much right around net cut fill or no change at all. So if I go in here, you can see I have a little asterisk. It's recognized that I have changed this profile over here. So I can just right click and rebuild that. And it's going to tell me I have a lot of fill over here, about a meter. It's actually 1.25 meters up here worth of fill. So I can easily analyze that my design is doing exactly what I want it, that my berms are going in the direction that I want it, how different elements in my plan are impacting it. And then I can go ahead and analyze that even further. I like to go up to my Analyze ribbon here in Civil and go to the Volumes dashboard and have a look in here. And I've actually got it set up for this total cut fill. And you can see I have a net 3,700 cubic meters of cut. You can adjust how this works in terms of if you go to subgrade, you can incorporate a lot of different surfaces all together with different subgrades and calculate the entire cut and fill. You can take it basically as far as you want, and I found it so incredibly accurate. I've had soccer fields, say, like parks just like this, where the contractor has come back to me after building the whole thing and told me that, oh, hey, your cut and fill calculations were wrong. And we actually had to truck, it wasn't a net zero cut fill. And we actually had to truck out 4,000 cubic or 4,000 or 400 trucks worth of soil. And I was like, okay, well, give me the survey. If you're right, you're right. I was able to then take that survey that he got after building it, plugged in those survey numbers in here, generated another surface, did a comparison, and found out he built the soccer field 1 foot too low. So it's really powerful being able to say, well, there's your 400 trucks worth of soil. No, you don't get an extra. And it really keeps everybody on your toes, and your clients will love you because you save them a lot of money in extras that way, because you're easily able to prove exactly what's going on in here really, really quickly once it's all set up. I can even go a little further than that. So I've got that cut fill volumes. Let's go over here. I can then take all of the smart surfaces and create a smart profile. And I've even decided to add my cut and fill into this profile as well, so you can easily see it. So you can see my skate park here. Basically what I've done is taken, if you've been in working with Civil, I've taken an alignment over here, an alignment over here. It's a different kind of civil object. I've told that alignment to look at both the proposed and existing surveys, and I've told that alignment to make a profile out of it and display that profile. And then once that's is displayed, I can go in here and I can add additional things from my other platforms. So I've gone in, just done some line work to kind of show some other elements, taken our blocks from over here under FX Site for elevation graphics, gone in here and say grabbed a few more trees, and place that in, and I can basically kind of show how this is all working and communicate this entire design really quickly. And then what I can also do is, oops, sorry about that. I have this berm here. I can go ahead and say, well, what will happen to the views if I make it a little bit bigger? And I actually have a different kind of grading element in here. This is actually a grading, what's that called? A grading group. It's technically a feature line, but in here is a, there we go, grading group. And what grading groups do is they take feature lines like this, and you go to your grading creation tools and you tell it, okay, go out from that feature line half a foot at a 5% down grade. And it will create another feature line based on that. That's completely dynamic. So what I can actually do is go in here and I'm going to pick a specific point that won't conflict with anything else. And I can actually move this berm around. And it's telling me everything's updating. And I can, I'll just automatically rebuild that. And it's changing everything. So I'm completely even moving my berm, changing the grades in here. I can analyze how my grades are working by going into here and say using some slope arrows. And I'm just going to regenerate that. You can go into settings and make these arrows a little smaller. I'm kind of going off of some of the defaults here in Civil. But you can see where the water is going in your plan, analyze it, and make changes. I'm going to turn that off for right now. We will go with this design. There we go. I can also go in here, oops, and I'm going to grab this one. There we go. And I can make some changes like smoothing out that grade in between, say here, and right along to here. And I told it to rebuild automatically this time, so it did so. And if I even go a little bit further and go in, and I'll just choose this one. Oops, wrong one. We'll choose that one, and I go in, and let's say I want, sure, that's going to be that elevation, and I'm going to go up even further here. So I'm going to go up to here. This is about 4.25. I can even tell it to be a different elevation. So it's at 3,440, and I could say I want to go right up to 35 meters. So that's a pretty big jump there. There we go. And we've got a lot more fill here. And if I go over to here, you can see my berm is a lot high, a little bit higher as well. Or I think this might need to be regenerated. I think it's at, no, it actually did go a bit higher. So I can just kind of grab my tree and move it up a little bit and make those changes. So that's in a nutshell what you can do just in Civil itself. So as soon as you start adding land effects into this, you can include this ability to have all of these smart plans. I can go in here even through an XREF in this plan and create a plant schedule. Yes, all of these smart automated tools to make sure that I am doing everything to the correct scale. And even through that XREF, I'm able to kind of coordinate with that planting plan and generate that schedule very quickly with that planting plan with correct numbers and everything. I can coordinate with even more. I can coordinate with my reference notes. I can then also take this over into 3D. Now, Civil does have a few 3D rendering capabilities. I haven't personally gone that far into using Civil's 3D capabilities in terms of visualizing it and rendering it, mostly because I've just found SketchUp myself to be a lot more powerful, where I could coordinate with others in my office. Because Civil does take a bit of training, it's really great in that you don't have to have everybody in your office know all the features of Civil. So Civil is a little bit of an upgraded cost of software as well, because you're getting all of these capabilities. So what you can do is, for the people in your office that don't have Civil, they can have AutoCAD or FXCAD, and you can actually coordinate this plan in AutoCAD and FXCAD, and they can see these contours in real time as well. They won't be able to edit them or change them in any way, but they can see it. They can XREF your drawing in very easily to be able to coordinate all the plans, like say the planting plan. They need to know what slope a certain hill is in order to know what kind of species to plant there. All of that can coordinate back and forth. You can also coordinate, I've coordinated with my irrigation plan. If I go over into, I'm not going to XREF it into here because I've got a few XREFs going in here, but I can easily go ahead and say XREF in my irrigation plan. And very quickly coordinate how it's all working out with everything in this plan. I can do the same and coordinate with my planting plan. And what you can actually do with land effects once you start kind of using these tools is you can coordinate with other consultants as well. So we have a lot of users who have, they don't have an irrigation designer in-house, but they have irrigation designers out of house who also use land effects. And what they can actually do is take this project that you set up and you put all of your information into, and you can actually export that out, and they coordinate it with other users of land effects in order to basically give them their planting plan, this planting plan, and the irrigation designer takes that planting plan and designs their irrigation based off of it, and then they send it back, and you can coordinate all of these things in Civil as well. You can even coordinate it in Map 3D, AutoCAD architecture, pretty much the entire AutoCAD suite you can coordinate with. So it's really, really powerful that way, in that you get the interconnectivity of the same drawing file type, with the ability of everybody in the team to be able to use the tools that they actually need to use. And some designers don't need Civil. They don't need all of this. And on some projects, you don't even need all of this, but it's handy to have this in the office on at least one computer, so that when you get a big project like this, where the stakes are really high, then you still can use it. And even I would even use it right down to like a backyard that's backing onto, has a steep slope, and you're trying to figure out how the cut and fill is going to impact that, and kind of massage the slopes and experiment a little even with the grades on, well, if I pop this up this way, how does that affect the slope? And you can really quickly experiment with a lot of different scenarios for a design for a steep backyard, say, where the encroachment onto the neighboring property is a very big deal. So kind of going off of that, once I have all of this interconnected here in Civil with my planting, with my surface, I can actually take this very quickly over into SketchUp, and you'd be very surprised. I did this actually all in about a few hours. I took this entire surface, this proposed surface. So all I did was I took this surface, I went to a different display. I saved it out first. Went to a different display of, I called it SketchUp surface. I created the surface, but basically what it's doing here is all of these triangles, instead of being triangles like they were in the swapping that I showed you before, these triangles are actually 3D faces. So what that means is when I import this entire model just as a 3D DWG into SketchUp, and I do need to save it down a bit to take out all of the BIM, or sorry, all of the Civil elements out of it, and then export it as a 3D model. I can immediately import that into SketchUp, and I'll open that now, and then just apply materials. is basically all I did. And that's pretty much as you do anywhere else. And I mean, it was so fast that it really it wouldn't take a lot of time to export it again. Mostly what I did was, if we take a look at this, you can see all of those triangles that are going into here. So I did a very simple model here. I would probably take it a little bit further with some plugins in SketchUp to give it a little bit more definition. But I mean, if you're just going to a review with the public, this is really, really good in terms of what you can do. And I did this in just a few hours, creating that, getting some components from the library. And the only thing that's really missing now is trees. And that's where you get that, again, BIM level 2 connection between land effects, or the BIM level 2 connection that land effects brings to this and elevates just civil alone or SketchUp alone, is that I can easily go back into my planting plan, and I can export all of this using my FX planting under presentation graphics, SketchUp, and export design. I'm not going to click it right now because, or I can show you what I did. Actually, it's really simple. Because I'm in the middle of a webinar and it takes a lot of, I have a lot of programs running right now in order to show you guys everything. It takes a lot of my computer resources. So what I did in order to keep the SketchUp model a little bit smaller just for this presentation is I didn't send the shrubs. And that's really easy. All you need to do is click on this and freeze the shrubs, and then go to presentation, and I'm going to just export that design without any of the shrubs. Really easy. And I can go back into my layers, and I'm just going to turn those shrubs right back on. Where was it? L shrub. There we go. Turn those back on for myself. But now I can go into my SketchUp model. I have my land effects toolbar already installed, already linked to a library. I've made sure that this project is already set to the same project. They're both oriented in the same way, which was really easy since I exported this this surface from my model. It was very easy to have it already aligned because it just was. And then I just go into here and I am importing. And actually, if I go kind of, you can see it right in here, how it kind of goes in. And let's go into, sorry, import. I've gone through and chosen all of my components, and I'm just going to import. Really easy. And you can see I also coordinated with some playground equipment in my site plan. And that automatically came through the connection as well. Again, another connection to your manufacturer processes. All of that data with real objects makes everything really, really quick, going back and forth between 2D and 3D. I can even go in here and say, move that over a bit and export that back into CAD, and it will update the definition. I can update all my callouts really, really quickly. I won't do that because of time today, but I just wanted to show you some other connectivity that we have going on. So if you've been paying attention to our newsletters, you will know that we recently released a Rhino plugin as well. And I'm not going to show you, oops, don't look behind the curtain. I'm not going to show you importing it because it's a bit more labor intensive on my computer. But you can see I've coordinated all of these plants with this Rhino model. Again, all I did was import it I'm gonna say no for now, assigned different components and just went for it. Imported it, it all came in at the right scale with the right component, and you can always assign your own higher graphic components as well. So it's the ability to kind of go back and forth. And I could actually move things around here in Rhino and even export that back out and then import it into SketchUp, and it will go directly from there. So now we have a three software capability. And I kind of let the cat out of the bag about 2 minutes too early, but we have some plans. And you can see over here, we have some awesome plans of also taking this connectivity over to Revit. So the idea is that you, as a landscape architect, work in the software that makes sense for you, but you're still able to coordinate your entire planting design, as well as more and more things as we improve and expand this capability into just coordinating everything between all of the drawings. It's going to be really, really powerful and awesome, especially once it starts going into more things like site, furniture, into all of these. We have a lot of great ideas in terms of that connectivity. I think that is, if I'm kind of just review over my notes, about everything that I wanted to go over. I think I did want to actually touch a little bit more on the connected data in land effects that you can bring into basically all of these platforms, which is like the irrigation data, being able to do those critical analyses, irrigation schedules, valve schedules, if you're coordinating with your irrigation designer on this plan. And he says, oh, I made some changes over here. Can you review them? You can easily go in and let's find that. If we go over into locate valve. Yeah, that's the one. And have a look at that list. You can coordinate with that irrigation designer and go over with the land effects data that they've given you as well. Say go to valve 5 where he's made a change, and it will zoom right in and you can see, oh, okay, I see what he did here in terms of the changes. Yes, he made the changes that I thought would be good, or I now see how I need to adjust my own design to now that that's been done, or anything like that. You can basically go back and forth. The power of BIM is to be able to collaborate with others in a way that makes designing both easier, and then in the end saves time in terms of error checking automation and avoiding problems before they become problems. Especially avoiding them before they become a problem on the field with shovels in the ground and things partially built. Thank you, and let's go ahead and look at some of the questions. I'm sure there's going to be a wide range of questions of varying complexity because it is such a big, broad topic, and I really did only scrape the surface, and I kind of oversimplified a few things, but hopefully in a way that helped you guys out. But yeah, questions.
You bet. We got some great questions here. Of course, you did hit that nerve. So, of course, Daniel wants to know if the Revit connection is available, and look for that to be available soon. We're going to have a webinar specific on Revit, and but we will have something announced. I would say keep a lookout in the newsletter when we have that available. As you can imagine, even though we do have this plugin there that does work, we need a web page that shows how to install it and covers some basic tech support. And we need to have our people here trained up on that so that when you do have a problem installing it or using it. And so what's funny is even though it's done and it's working, there's a multi-month gap here in just getting logistically all of our resources in line. So just keep your eyes out. There will be an announcement in an upcoming newsletter on when it will be available. Have another good question here from Brian. this is a great one regarding Civil 3D. He says, how do I ask an engineer who's using Civil 3D to export a 3D model that's best compatible with SketchUp?
Okay, that's best compatible with SketchUp. So how about I just show you guys what I did. Here's the exact process that I went through. I went into the, and you can only really do this in Civil because you need to be able to make this. If I go into, I'm going to select that, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to edit my surface style. That's a shortcut to get there instead of trying to find it through the settings. Here I am. So basically all I did was I turned on slopes to be visible here. And then under, where was it? If I remember, under analysis and slopes, I changed those to be 3D faces over here. And originally, I based this off of another, I think the contours and triangles surface style. And I basically kind of made my own and then changed it to be 3D faces. I picked reds because it really doesn't matter, and then just made sure that only that was displayed. So that's all that style is. It's showing 3D faces as red. And then I'm going to do a save as, because I like to keep things clean and not change them. Test. There we go. And I am basically going to take this tin surface and explode it. So that's done. And then I'm going to take all the rest of this. Basically, got it all. And deselect my tin surface that I exploded and just delete everything. And it will make a hullabaloo, but you've already exploded it. So it won't affect this. If you didn't explode this, this surface would basically disappear, especially if you have it on automatic updates. And then I'm going to take this again and explode it again. And now what I have here are 3D faces. And I'm going to go up to my AutoCAD Civil, export to an AutoCAD. AutoCAD drawing, export settings. I set to 2013 because SketchUp is sometimes funny, and I just made sure it was as low as it would definitely need. And now I'm just going to save this. I'll just save this to my desktop for now. And export that. It thinks a bit. And basically what this export is doing is taking out all of the proxies and Civil data, because if you try and import a model from Civil 3D with Civil data in it, it will tell you no. It will say no. It's not going to do it. So that's done. I'm going to go over to, I'm actually going to open up a new SketchUp. Where'd that go? Okay, I have that one. I will close this down, save. I will get up a new one. And you're just going to need to make sure, you don't really need to make sure actually, but you should make this, let's quit that totally, and then open it. There we go. I'm going to import. I think, let me just check my units. I'm pretty sure they're meters. Model info. It doesn't actually matter for this point, but for later. I'm going to import desktop. There it is. Check my options. I'm actually not going to preserve the drawing origin. That looks great. Okay, import. It goes through. It tells you what it did, and it has a face. And then basically all I did was it makes it into a block. I went in here and popped that all over to, say, grass. And then I went in here with my erase tool. You could just turn off at this point, even if you just say in settings, you could save a bit of time. Let's see, why won't it show? By turning off edges, looks pretty good. Or you can go through and use the erase tool with, for my Mac, it's Control, I believe it's, I think it's Shift or something. And I basically just went through here and smoothed all of these. So if I go in and then smooth this, I get a much nicer look to it all. Oops, I didn't smooth, I erased. That's all I did, and then went in here and applied a material, brought in some models from the 3D warehouse of tennis courts, and it's perfect. You can even then go and coordinate with Revit. I actually forgot to mention that. If we go into here, here in Civil, you actually have a great coordination component over in here. You can, I believe if you launch Exchange settings, I think this is where it is, you can create that IMX file that you can coordinate your civil drawing with a Revit file as well. So if you and your architect coordinate your civil and your Revit through this button, it's only available in Civil, and they do it on their side as well, then your models will be synced up. So when your architect exports their 3D building over to you, because you can absolutely use a 3D building in Civil in a DWG format, it will actually come in right where the building's supposed to be. And then you can export your information over to Revit to do the exact same thing as I just kind of did in SketchUp. I haven't perfected that particular workflow yet. I do know it's possible, but you can basically do something exactly like this and export your site model over into Revit in order for them to show the site around their building, and it will automatically come in at the right spot. Usually these things are geolocated.
And you hit on a couple of great topics there. Of course, InfraWorks, and also one of the other attendees mentioned that, of course, 3ds Max is great with being able to take a Civil 3D file directly into 3ds Max, and of course this is going towards quite a software loadout, and at times, yes, unfortunately, a little expensive. But you can also see our perspective, which is we want to get where the software platform allows an add-on, that little land effects toolbar and the technology that we've come up with to be able to send the land effects objects over the cloud to any of these supported platforms, so that whatever loadout you have to use for whatever particular project, of course, if you don't want to have, for whatever reason, let's just say you don't want to invest in InfraWorks and you'd rather just have the architect kick out that Revit model of the building as a SketchUp file, which is another way to do the coordination, and you're doing all the coordination for a project in SketchUp, then we have our SketchUp toolbar there, so you'd be utilizing that one. But that's definitely showing kind of our master plan with where we're going, is having that little land effects toolbar, ideally and eventually on all of these different platforms. So I think we did get to all the questions. If there's any more that come up, please email us. If this, like I said, if this gets you going with more involved queries of exactly issues you've been having, and get those to us. Send in files that you're having problems with, you name it. This is definitely, it's always helpful. As you can imagine, Amanda spent a great deal of time getting these files together and having to kind of invent some designs. And so it's always helpful for you to just send us some files that give us a giant head start with getting this all together. Any last things to mention, Amanda?
Just kind of where a lot of the questions are going in terms of different software. There's a lot of ways to accomplish BIM, and we kind of highlighted a few of them, and you guys can definitely experiment and tell us your successes in experimentation of how you're doing your workflow. We'd love to feature those and tell other people about them too, get the word out so that landscape architects as a profession, as if we all share that kind of information, we can elevate everybody up to the right kind of standards so that we're seeing absolutely in the minds of the entire public, not just our colleagues in other professions, as leaders and innovators, and using the right tools that are needed for projects so that we can be project leads. And then any questions that you guys want to ask, if you even have some questions, I saw some come in about just civil in general. While we don't always answer those, I can lead you in the right direction if you need. But otherwise, have a great weekend.